All right, so today we're going to do something a little different. We're jumping into a pretty provocative blog post called Inflation of the American Society. Now, our goal here isn't to agree or disagree or even to fact-check every single number. It's to understand how the author, who calls himself the Appalachian Gorilla, actually builds his argument.
So, the author doesn't kick things off with data or a big statistic. They start with a feeling. This quote right here, this grating sensation, that's the whole jumping off point for their entire analysis. It's a gut reaction, an instinct telling them that the way we all talk about prices is just fundamentally off.
So let's start right where the author does, with this powerful gut feeling. This is what's driving the whole investigation. This feeling that there's a real problem happening in American society, and it's not the one everyone is talking about. And this really gets to the heart of their premise. Their gut is telling them that the issue just isn't that simple. It's not just that a gallon of milk costs more. And it's this conviction that pushes them to do their own research, what they themselves call crude research, just to see if the data backs up this instinct. So to test that gut feeling, the author does their own price check. You can see they put together a really simple table, just comparing a few costs and the average income between 1980 and today. They want to see for themselves how things have really changed. Now, the author is super clear about their method. They call it crude, and they make a big point of saying they did the math themselves because they just don't trust data that's been, massaged by somebody else. So this is a very personal line of reasoning, and they're using that top line, the average income, as the baseline for everything else. Okay, so here's the first piece of their math, the foundational number. Average income has gone up 5.3 times since 1980. That's the yardstick they're going to use for everything else. But then, look at a car. According to their numbers, its price has jumped 6.6 times. So right away, that's outpacing income. And they find a pretty similar pattern with something as simple as a loaf of bread, up 6.2 times. So yeah, some things are more expensive relative to what people earn. But this, right here, is where the author's argument takes a very, very sharp turn. You see, even though their own numbers show some items outpacing income, the author comes to this pretty surprising conclusion that prices really haven't increased all that much. To them, this confirms that initial gut feeling. The real problem isn't inflation. No, it's something else entirely. So if it's not the cost of goods, what is the real problem according to them? Well, their answer has nothing to do with stuff. It has everything to do with the changing value of people. And here it is. This is the author's central thesis. They argue that this massive split has happened over the last few decades. On one hand, American workers have become way more productive. But on the other hand, their actual economic value hasn't just flatlined. The author says it's actually gone down. To try and explain this, the author actually introduces their own concept, which they call human appreciation or depreciation. They basically argue that regular economics is broken because it doesn't even consider the changing value of human beings as a key part of the equation. So how did this happen? How did labor get so devalued? Well, in this next part, the author lays out their two-part theory, and they really try to emphasize it in their writing, with these dramatic, stylistic things like writing whoosh and claps in the middle of a sentence. Okay, so according to the source, this devaluation happened in two main steps. First, the destruction of unions, which got rid of collective bargaining power for workers. And second, and this is really their core claim, the labor market was intentionally flooded by importing what they call excess humans, specifically to drive down wages. So all that extra money from workers being so much more productive, where did it go? The author has a pretty blunt answer. It went straight to the top 1%. And the way they did it, in this author's view, was through this flooding the market with more people.
Now, we have to be perfectly clear here. We are quoting the author directly. They use this very inflammatory and racist language to try and connect their big theory directly to the reader's own life, arguing that immigration is a major reason that wages are being suppressed, even for college-educated workers.
But then, in a kind of interesting turn, the author broadens their argument. They say that a community is like an ecosystem, and when you devalue blue-collar and service jobs, it ends up hurting everybody, including the tech nerds and teachers, because it just creates this bigger pool of people fighting for all kinds of jobs, which pushes all wages down.
And this all builds to the author's final section,
which is really two things at once. It's a very dark prediction for the future, and it's a direct challenge to the person reading the post.
And once again, we have to present the author's words exactly as they wrote them. They wrap up their whole argument with this really shocking and racist warning, painting this incredibly violent, apocalyptic picture of the future if this devaluation of the community keeps going. And then comes the final twist. The author turns it all around and puts the blame squarely on you, the reader. They argue that by wanting things like cheap DoorDash, the reader is living in a fantasy world, and that makes them part of the problem, complicit in a system that devalues their own neighbors, and in the end, themselves.
And the whole thing, this entire post, it just ends with this one simple, provocative question. After laying out this whole complex, data-filled, and really controversial argument, the author just leaves the reader with a challenge. They've made their case, and now they're asking, can we even talk about this?